Doctors and nurses have read it. Have you ever witnessed a couple have a child that was obviously not the father? If so, what happened? Story 1. I worked in labor and delivery. Had a very young mother come in, accompanied by her parents. She was just 12 to 13, and her parents looked stuffy and kept telling her that she should have had she was too young, etc. Her mother was silent the whole time but leaked tears for her constantly. While she labored, I received a call from a very young boy who said he was her boyfriend. His trembling voice explained that her father wouldn't come to the hospital. I explained that I couldn't give out information, but he could talk to her afterward. I went in, told her he had called, and showed me a picture of him. He was white, with straight red hair, pimply and tiny, the runt of the litter. About an hour later, a phys ed teacher stopped by to check on her, which I thought was odd. We didn't get many teachers checking on students. He was as opposite of the boyfriend as he could get. Tall, very muscular, beautiful smile and rich chocolate brown skin. The girl's father accompanied her to the delivery room. Odd, but okay. The more she pushed, the louder she cried. In between, she kept saying, "Sorry, Daddy." Finally, out slid a very beautiful chocolate brown baby boy. I thought her father was going to pass the freak out on my delivery room floor. I did my usual, "It's a boy," and said nothing else. I handed him off to a nursery nurse and got Dad a chair. The new mom said, "I'm sorry, Daddy," over and over again. Her mom, now frowned, came to see the baby, took one look, started asking God for forgiveness, and left. I sent her dad home a short bit later, admonishing him to react at home, not here. I set up a time for a counselor to meet with him before I left. After talking to the new mom, she admitted her gym teacher had been giving her special treatment. I explained to her and she said she'd only kissed the boyfriend, but had stayed after school to be with her gym teacher. I'm state mandated to report child abuse, so I did. 2 weeks later, with her world shattered, her baby was given up for adoption. I wish her the best. Of note, this was in 1989. Story 2. Worked in the Army hospital for Fort Lewis. A woman came in for belly pain and we found out and told her she was 10 weeks pregnant. The husband at the bedside started laughing, grabbed his coat, and left the room, explaining to us that he had been in Afghanistan 3 weeks prior. He looked back at her and just said, "Well, that's that, Brittany." I always liked how classily he left her while she just silently stared off into space. Story 3. My husband and I were visiting our friends who just had a baby. We're the godparents, and we were standing in the hallway talking to both sets of grandparents. Well, apparently, the hospital has a rule that only 5 visitors may be present in the hallway, but the security guard had let all 6 of us in for some reason, and we didn't realize it. This nasty nurse comes to us, notes that there are 6 of us, tells us someone will have to leave immediately, and then turns to my husband and says, "Oh, are you the daddy?" Without missing a beat, he says, "That's what we're all trying to figure out here." She gets a look of horror on her face and backs away. Story 4. If you guys are enjoying these stories, you should watch Lauren Lake's Paternity Court on TV. My favorite case was one where the female spent almost the entire 25 minutes going over all this proof that the kid was his, using facial similarities, swearing up and down, and even bringing in witnesses attest that she was of good character and wouldn't cheat, even straight insulting the guy, saying how screwed it is he denies his child and won't grow up, etc. Through all of this, the guy just stood there quietly, not saying a word, not defending himself, nothing. Finally, the judge asks if he has anything to say or would like to plead his case. He motions to the only thing on the desk, a manila folder. Plaintiff takes it to the judge, she opens it, reads it for a minute, then dismisses the case in favor of the guy. Turns out he had been deployed overseas in Afghanistan during the year before and during the entire pregnancy and birth. He came home after 4 years and was introduced to his 2-year-old child. Oh, how could she possibly expect to win that? Story 5. I had a vasectomy. While chatting with the doctor, he told me about another patient. The guy had 3 kids and came in for the snip because he and his wife decided they were done having children. The doc opened up his sack and found nothing to snip. This guy was born without the ability to have any children. The poor doctor had to explain to him what happened. Imagine finding out that way. This is hardcore. Story 6. Not in the hospital, but a friend and his girlfriend were on again, off again, and she got pregnant. She swears it's his. He wants a paternity test. He moves in with her and her mom, she has the baby, and takes the test. The test is taking a while to come back. He and his family are over the moon with the baby and kind of forgot about it. Mentions it to the girlfriend's mom one day and she says, "Oh yeah, she didn't tell you? Came back a while ago. Totally your baby." Awesome. All is well. A few months later, they're moving out and he finds the test in a box. Not his baby. Story 7. I used to work in the newborn nursery at a hospital. We got the babies right from delivery, cleaned them up, footprinted them, checked vitals, etc. Dads usually came in with the newborns. This dad comes in with this baby. Dad is white, mom is white, and baby is very obviously not white. The dad was very quiet standing next to the baby, watching us clean it up. He says quietly, "I don't think this is my baby." You could tell he was absolutely devastated. We advised him not to sign the birth certificate until he was sure. Not sure what happened after we sent the baby back out to mom, but I felt awful for the guy. I can feel his sadness through the text. Story 8. My best friend was dating a girl and knocked her up. They got engaged and planned to get married right after the baby was born. There were about 10 of us in the waiting room waiting for her to crank out the baby. It was essentially her parents, they were in another state, some of her friends, and some of ours. After sitting there for about 2 hours, he walks out with a smirk on his face and says, "Let's go." We all thought something horrible had happened. Her friends asked how the baby is, and he said, "Fine, but black." He motioned for us to go, so we followed him. In the parking garage, he tells us to follow him to his apartment, then sends me a text asking if I could put him up for a while. We literally moved him out of his apartment and into my spare bedroom in like an hour tops. Her parents didn't know who to be mad at. The confusion on their faces when he told the baby was black was priceless. Story 9. I was blood typing a newborn once. Mom was an O+, baby was an AB+, which is more or less not possible. I immediately panicked because, Jesus God, they mixed up the babies. Someone has the wrong baby. We're gonna get sued. They're gonna have to genetic test the entire nursery. What if they subpoena me for the idiot who discovered the problem? I don't have insurance. What if they sue me? After repeating the test 3 times, I called the floor and told them that they'd either drawn the wrong baby's blood or they'd switched babies because mom couldn't be the baby's mother. Lol, no, it was a donor egg. Everyone was where they were supposed to be. Oh God, my heart though. Story 10. I used to work with a guy whose wife was pregnant. Near the time for delivery, everyone at our place of business had a big party with gifts, money, etc. So the big day comes. The water breaks and they get in the car to go to the hospital. She breaks the news on the way there. It's not his child. The kid is of another race, and if he could just drop her off at the hospital and then leave, that would be great. He took a few days off work, found a new apartment, moved out, filed for divorce, etc. He called into work and told someone what happened. News spread pretty fast. All congratulations cards were cleaned up and thrown away. Everyone was very sensitive to his pain. Except somehow, I don't know how, I did not get the news. So on his first day back, I walked into his office he shared with 67 other guys and said, "Hey, Daddy-O, how's fatherhood so far? Getting any sleep? Got some pictures? Let's see the little tyke." He slowly lifted his head to look at me with a painful look. The room was dead silent. One of his workmates stood up, grabbed my arm, and walked me out of the room, shushing me. "What happened?" I asked. "Did it die? What's the problem?" When he told me I was about to die myself. I still feel bad for the dude, and it's been 30 years. Story 11. A coworker's aunt just found out her dad wasn't actually her dad. She was really big into genealogy and had mapped out her family tree as far as she could go. She took one of those ancestry DNA tests about 2 months ago, and her father's side didn't line up with what she was expecting. In fact, she didn't recognize a single name that she was matched with paternally. She casually asked her dad if he knew any of the names, and he recognized the surname of the maintenance man at the apartment complex where he and his wife, aunt's mom, lived shortly after they had gotten married. Claimed he was a lousy repairman who always flirted with his wife, etc. Aunt's mom had passed away a few years ago, so she decided not to tell her dad the news. Story 12. Found out in her first divorce hearing that she was pregnant, and the judge wouldn't grant the divorce since her child was conceived during our marriage. The judge even went as far as making me wait 9 months till the baby was born and take a DNA test to prove the child wasn't mine, even though I am a woman. After almost 3 years of marriage to my wife, I caught her cheating on me with the current father of her child in late December 2016. By the first of the year, we both decided to work on our marriage and try to put everything behind us. The guy she cheated on me with was the fiancé of one of my best friends. Well, by the end of January 2017, she was still keeping her relationship with him going. So I left her and moved completely out of her house the night that I found out. I filed for divorce later that week, and around the beginning of March was our first divorce hearing. In court, the judge asked if any children were born into the marriage, and we both said no. He then asked if any children were conceived in the marriage. I said no, and she agreed there had been. He then told us he could not grant the divorce since a child had been conceived and paternity had not yet been established. The entire 9 months that she carried that child, she still continued to tell me how much she missed me. Yada, yada, yada. Even went as far as telling me, The main reason I was with him was so we could have our own child together. Believe me, I wasn't idiotic enough to fall for her tricks. After 2 more court appearances and a paternity test, our divorce was granted at the beginning of this month. It was a long journey, and boy am I glad it is over. Story 13. Had a college buddy whose fiancée was pregnant. They were the perfect couple. Both had just over a year with great careers starting out, and everything was butterflies and rainbows. Fast forward to the delivery room. They're in there and comes out a very black baby. He's quite the pale redhead, and she's a blonde, blue-eyed Texas girl. He made sure everyone was okay, waited for her parents to arrive, and left without saying a word. He moved all his stuff out of the house while she was in the hospital and cut off all communications with her. Just walked out of their lives in the most stone-cold act I'd ever seen. They were together for 9 years, and he just left cold turkey. She tried to contact him at his job a few times, but he quickly moved up the ladder and eventually got a job in another city. He told me once that he took solace in the fact that her family had already dropped about $10,000 in a wedding that never happened. He's a gent for waiting for her parents. Story 14. A distant cousin of mine definitely has children that don't belong to the father. My cousin was adopted as an infant and was essentially a crack baby. She struggled with some developmental issues and has a low IQ compared to most, but can still live on her own with little to no issues. She, a white woman, married a Latino guy, really dark brown skin several years ago, and they had a son together who has dark hair, dark skin, and dark eyes. He's easily identified as their son. The real trouble happens years later. Her husband, who we'll call Javier, has some IQ issues of his own, just a little slow when it comes to tasks and reasoning. Anyway, Javier is in the military and gets deployed internationally for about 6 months. When he comes home, his wife is 4 months pregnant. You do the math. He still believes the baby is his own, even after it's born with pale skin and blonde hair and blue eyes. If that wasn't bad enough, it happens again 2 years later with another baby. Same blonde hair and blue eyes. Everyone knows she slept with a different man. It was actually her high school boyfriend, but Javier still thinks the children are his. It's kind of sad, but at this point, there's not much you can do. He has raised the kids as his own. Javier is a good man. Your cousin certainly isn't a good woman. Story 15. My sister got pregnant in high school and later met her now husband when she was 5 months pregnant. She's white and her boyfriend is black. The baby daddy was white and not present. I was with our entire family, including my now brother-in-law, visiting the baby. My sister was still in recovery from her C-section. My brother-in-law picks up my niece. The nurse looks at him and says, she should darken up in a few days. We all had a laugh. We knew he wasn't the father, but she didn't. I always wondered if she felt bad or assumed adultery. They have 2 more girls together and he was able to adopt a third years later. Story 16. Kinda happened to my mom. My biological father is Greek with very pale skin and my mom is a white Western European mutt. When I was born, I had very dark skin and a full head of thick black hair. He didn't seem concerned, but his mother freaked out, called my mother and grandmother not so nice names, and left. My father ended up splitting on us when I was about 3 weeks old with no explanation. A couple of months later, my skin lined, and all of my black hair fell. Turns out he was the father. We've never tried to reach back out to his family because in that first year of my life, they went through a lot of drama, including arrests, rehab stays, drive-by shootings, an affair followed by a divorce, another baby mama my mother didn't know about. The list goes on. My father and I tried to form a relationship when I was in high school. It went okay at first, it then got weird very quickly. He insisted I called him dad, insisted on regular visitation, routinely showed up at my friends' and boyfriends' houses causing a scene, and insisted I get family pictures with his new lady and his 5 other kids. None of us have the same mother, and this is not including the baby he had and ditched before he got together with my mom. I regret ever trying at all. He and his family were and are still trashy hot messes, and I'm glad my family decided to keep me away from them. The cherry on top, he was working for my now husband's parents when my husband and I first met. Once his parents found out who he was and what had happened, they fired him, so I would never have to run into him at their business. He had it coming anyway. I'm so glad to finally stop making excuses for him and let him go. Story 17. I worked as a lab tech before I became a nurse. We had a set of twins in the neonatal intensive care unit, or NICU. It was super early and the mom was still in the operating room getting sewed up from the cesarean. I was drawing baby B's blood when mom was wheeled over to baby A's isolate. She was crying and said, "Oh, thank God you're not black. I've been so worried for the last 7 months." So newborn babies, especially when they're born early, are very pink, almost red. So even if a baby was part black, their skin isn't necessarily dark yet. But looking at these babies, it was obvious they were going to be black. The shape of the face, the texture of the hair, and baby B that I was working on had an intense Mongolian spot. A few weeks later, my NICU nurse friend told me that the babies were now on a no-info status, meaning security alert. Can't give anyone information about them, can't refer to them by name, etc. She said there was a huge fight because the mom's husband, white guy, obviously noticed that the babies were half black and that mom had cheated on him and got pregnant. The real dad, black guy, came in and didn't realize the mom was even married. Those poor babies. Story 18. I had a test done on my son when he was about 7 months old. Baby mama constantly told me he wasn't mine, but then came after me for child support. Got the test done, and he was mine. So I hired a lawyer and we sat and chilled. 4 months later, she's arrested on charges of distribution of meth, where my son lived, and he's been with me for the last 8 years. Now she pays me child support. I got my kid when he was 11 months old after the Department of Homeland Security did a random stop and drug test on her and she failed for meth. I then started a 2-year battle in juvenile court to not allow the state to reunify with the mother. I finally got juvenile court to release my case to district court, where we fought for actual custody. During our district court battle, she took my son for a visit, and I got a call from the cops in a city an hour away that she had been arrested on a domestic with her boyfriend at a hotel. They searched her and found needles and meth paraphernalia. That was the last time she had him unsupervised. We went about 2 years of her barely calling, seeing him once a month for 10 to 20 minutes, until she finally got arrested on attempt to distribute meth charges. She got out on bail and was arrested for it again 3 weeks later. She spent 3 years in state prison and has been out for about 8 months now. She appears to be clean and just gave me $100 for extra child support yesterday. She's only court appointed to pay $52 a month, so we're giving her a shot. But she is still and will remain on supervised visits for a long time. The whole fiasco has been such a blur. It's hard to remember exactly when, what, and where happened, especially after 4 to 5 years of really not having to deal with her. At the time, it was utter pain though. She punched me a couple of times, lied under oath, sent me threats, inappropriate photos of her with other men. The list goes on and on. I've really tried to put a lot of it behind me and forget about as much of it as I can to try and help me forgive her, so she can at least be somewhat a part of my kid's life because that's what he wants. I just watch her like a hawk now. Story 19. I had the opposite happen, sort of. My wife and I are both brown-skinned, dark-haired half Mexicans, and our moms are both 100% white blondes with blue and green eyes. So we sort of knew it was a crapshoot with our baby, but the nurse who was assisting with delivery had no idea. At one point, she gets sort of nervous and calls for help, and another, I guess more senior nurse, came in and nodded and came over to talk to me. I thought there was something wrong with the baby as she comes over and stumbled through some questions. So I was the father and no one else was coming, etc. Then finally, she awkwardly asks if either of us happened to be blonde growing up. I said, yeah, I was, and both the baby's grandparents are blonde as they come. This wave of relief went over her, and she brought me over to see this blonde-as-hell crowning baby head. It's funny because he looks just like me if you applied a gringo Instagram filter. We often get awkward questions about his heritage, and my wife always hits him with a, yeah, we're not sure if he's mine. It's always funny to see people nod for a moment and then go, wait, what? Story 20. Kinda off topic, but I gotta give my friend credit for doing something I don't think I could ever do. Found out that after being married and having a 3- and 1-year-old, his wife had been cheating on him, multiple times with multiple men. Everyone is white though, so no obvious signs. Anyway, when he finds that there is a chance neither of the kids are his, he buys 2 paternity tests. He brought them home, but then the horrible conclusion hits him. He was prepared if they were his. He was prepared if they weren't. He had no freaking idea what he would do if one was and one wasn't. So he threw tests away, they divorced, she keeps seeing people for short times, and he's now remarried to a fantastic person. Story 21. Not a medical professional, but I know of a related court case that made it to the state's highest court. A black guy and a white woman are married. She's a former prostitute, and at some point they separate. He moves out of state, she moves out of state, and she goes back to prostitution. Guy gets a phone call around 9 months later from a friend and relative of his ex saying that his ex is pregnant and ready to give birth any day now. The guy drives across the country so he could be there for the delivery. Baby comes out and is white, has blue eyes, and has red hair. Mom says, it must be a trick baby. Seeing as the guy is black, he understandably pieces out. Later on, the mom's parental rights are terminated. As you can imagine from the prostituting, she was not a fit mother. And the state went about trying to find the dad to be notified before the kid can be adopted. Since the dude was still her husband at the time the child was born, legally he was the presumptive father. The state does genetic testing, and twist, turns out he is the father. For an extra kick in the pants, the state ends up terminating his parents' rights for abandonment. Not a happy ending. Story 22. Similar, but I don't know where else to put it because it just makes me laugh. My aunt is a nurse in the maternity ward. She had a couple come in and they were both very black. Lady has a baby and it is super white, like totally pale with no trace of any pigment. They put the baby on her mom and the mom starts yelling about how this isn't her baby and they stole her baby. In all fairness, you can be very confused during and after delivery. It wasn't stupidity, just sobbing and freaking out, and the father is just sitting there and looks very confused because even he's realizing that even if she did cheat, there's no way the baby would be that white. The doctor and nurses are trying to assure her that this is her baby and that the skin usually darkens later. Come to find out, when he called his mom, she pointed out that they have a second cousin who is albino, and maybe the baby got that gene. Turns out that's what happened. The baby was albino.